much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming out to this event, because the events of what's going on in Israel, Palestine, and particularly in Gaza, the last couple of years have been utterly horrendous. I suspect that I don't need to tell this group that this issue did not start on October 7th. I suspect that October 7th, however, has been a pivotal moment because it clarified a lot of issues that were confused before. Many people tell you it's complicated. Actually, it's not complicated. It is very simple and very straightforward. But there is so much deception that goes around it that fog is created surrounding it so that people don't have straightforward principles to use. I've always known that there's been what's called the Palestine exception. That when it comes to Palestine, somehow the same rules that use with everybody else don't seem to apply. But I've never believed that it would be to this degree. That there would be an actual active genocide taking place, which everybody can see daily on their social media, mostly because the main news tries to avoid it, where the leaders of that who are perpetuating that genocide are openly admitting it, sometimes even in English, although usually in Hebrew, that they are out to destroy everything, that there are no innocents in Gaza, that we need to burn the place down, make it totally unlivable, that carrying out activities such as open starvation of the population. At the beginning they used to say, no, they're not really starving, we're allowing in X number of trucks every day. And then they're saying openly, no, we're not going to allow in any food unless we get X, Y, or Z. For this to happen openly, and still significant portion of the media, the politicians, and the church are not willing to call it for what it is, I found utterly amazing. You know, when the Holocaust took place in Germany, many people, including Germans, claimed they really didn't know until after the war what was going on. And for 70 years, the whole world, including the church, has been blamed for its silence, if not complicity, in the Holocaust. So how do you understand that this time, when nobody can claim that they don't know, particularly in this country, when the complicity is so ugly, not only by providing the weapons and the money, but also the diplomatic cover to allow this to happen, was amazing to me. Therefore, this moment is important. For the church, it's important for the international community. It's important, dare I say, for the whole human race, because for this to continue and to be tolerated, we need to break down the very architecture of international law, which is what is happening now. We need to stop accepting what has been an acceptable rules and norms since World War II. You see, after the Second World War, people, nations, but mostly ordinary people in civil society said, this is horrible. We cannot live our lives like this. There has to be rules. There has to be conventions. So they made up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, unanimously passed. They created the structures of the United Nations. I know the Security Council still has the problem with the veto because the powerful countries don't want to be restrained. But they created an international criminal law. They created a set of organizations. The United Nations organization include about 40 organizations, not just the Security Council and the General Assembly. World Health Organization, World Food Program, UNESCO, all sorts of organizations that create international cooperation, which is absolutely necessary. We can't live as America first, or this country first, or every country first. We can't live on this planet as individuals. We have to work collectively. And by and large, it worked. By and large, international norms have occurred. You know, there's 194 countries. For 70 years, there have only been about 5 cases of a country trying to take over the territory of another country. I can name them for you because some of them are very familiar to you. When Iraq tried to take Kuwait as a 19th province, when Morocco tried to take over Western Sahara, and the rest of the world said, no, 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 that's not allowed until, of course, our president said it is. There's been Russia, which took over the Ukraine and tried to move into different areas and claim we have tribal rights and historic rights and ethnic groups that need to come into our... and there's been also, well, there's also China taking over Tibet, that's 4. But there's also been this Israel taking over not only East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, but now trying to take over other parts. And the United States and Israel, who have been champions of international law, are now trying to roll that back and to say, well, these rules don't really apply. Maybe we shouldn't care. It depends on how many cards you hold, Trump says to Zelensky. Do you have any cards to play? And if you don't, you are meaningless. And if we are powerful, we can take over Greenland. We can take over the Panama Canal. We can take over Canada, make it the 51st. We can do whatever we want because we are powerful. And we can do it. That's a horrible world to live in where there is no international law and international values. So why is it? How is it that there is willingness to destroy the very structures of international law, to ignore the moral and historical imperative of a genocide taking place before our eyes, to allow a new process to take place that's based on power alone and not on rights and not on law and not on values? And how is it that the church can be so intimidated, so cowardly, so silent that even to call for a ceasefire, stop, let's stop it for a while and figure out what's happening, becomes a very controversial thing. That you can demand, you see a little fight in the street, or kids fighting in the playground, the first thing you do is you try to separate them. Hold on, stop beating up on each other, then we'll try to figure out who's right and who's wrong and who started it and how we can settle it. But the first thing you do is a ceasefire. And yet to call for a ceasefire here was controversial. I don't understand it. Well, there is an explanation. And I will start by trying to be very empathetic and put a positive face on it. The fact that the church and the world was so silent and so guilty, correctly guilty, of anti-Jewish discrimination and racism, to the point of allowing a genocide against Jews, has been used to justify creating this exception. That as victims of racism and discrimination and the Holocaust, somehow they've been given a free pass. That we don't want to make their life miserable, we don't want to accuse them, we don't want to hold them to any standards. Even though you're not doing Jews any favor by doing that. In fact, you're feeding into anti-Semitism, which continues to exist. By the way, I don't like the term anti-Semitism because we Palestinians are more Semitic than most Israelis. Anyway, I'm using it because that's the term that's used to designate hatred of and discrimination against Jewish people. So that's one reason why we are in the situation we're in today. The second reason is because there have been very powerful forces that have been controlling the narrative as to what's going on. And they've created a narrative which has seeped into the consciousness of people in the West. In the churches, there's been Christian Zionism, sometimes of a crazy variety that talks about end time and Armageddon and prophecies, but not always. It still exists also in mainline churches, where people think that somehow there is a special connection, that there's something God wants to, that God gave this land, and that there's a unity of values, that somehow Jews and Christians, strangely for people who have hated on Jews for a long time, that they have shared values that are different from Muslims and other people. So that the battle is a battle between enlightened European, Western, almost white groups against barbaric Muslim, other people. That the state of Israel really wants peace. And that the only problem is that the Arabs somehow don't want peace and can't accept to give up their land for somebody else because they are vicious and barbaric, and they teach their children to hate, and they don't love their children. Somehow they just want to hate on the Jews. This powerful narrative, I usually don't go for conspiracy theories, but we have seen evidence that powerful forces, particularly in this country, dictate even what terms you're allowed or not allowed to use when talking about Israel and the Palestinians. When you refer to October 7, you have to use the word barbaric attack. Specifically the word barbaric. I know this because my brother is a journalist, and he wrote an opinion piece for the LA Times, and came back and said, no, you didn't condemn Hamas. He says, I did, here it is, yeah, but you didn't use the word barbaric. You have to use that particular term. You mustn't view this as people rising. You mustn't mention that Hamas actually attacked and captured 3 army bases, killing 340 soldiers and capturing 51. I don't want to glorify what Hamas did because I am a pacifist after all. But it wasn't a massacre of going home to home killing anybody who's Jewish. The battle was shifted into Israel. Usually Israel likes to fight on Arab land, so that whoever gets killed is collateral damage. And for the first time, it was Arabs who fought and moved the battle into Israeli areas. I don't want to belittle the suffering of people who were killed, particularly civilians who should not be attacked ever. But the narrative that was created successfully prevented people from addressing the reality on the ground. See, international law makes 2 categories. There's combatants and non-combatants. And you're supposed to fight combatants and to reduce to the minimum any harm to non-combatants. Israel created a new category called Hamas. And if you are related to Hamas in any way, whether you're a doctor or a teacher or a wounded fighter, it's irrelevant. You're a legitimate target. You and your family and the building in which you happen to be, or the hospital in which you are being treated, is a legitimate target that can be destroyed together with everything around it. Why? Hamas is a political movement. I don't like it for a number of reasons. It's an Islamic movement. I'm a Christian. They're into armed struggle. I'm into pacifism and non-violence. I believe in separation of church and state. I don't like religious movements at all that are political and that try to take over power, whether they are Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. But Hamas is not the evil demonic force that it has been created in this country and elsewhere, to the point where anything related to it is taboo. You can't even discuss it. I was asked, though, however, to say, where do we go from here? To look a little bit to the future, not just for Gaza and the people of Gaza, but also for all the people in Palestine, Israel, Jews, and Arabs alike. Because the reality is, there have been, and there are today in that land, 2 groups of people, 2 ideologies. And please, I want to make it clear, there is no symmetry between the 2. Moral, historic, ethical, or otherwise. So I'm going to avoid the kind of analysis or discussion as to who was there first, who is right and who's wrong. Does God side with one side or another? What does international law say? Who violated human rights? I'm going to skip all that discussion and make it easy for you. There are 2 groups together living in this land, the Holy Land, the land called Palestine, Israel, Eretz Israel, call it what you will. One group, I'll start with the Palestinian group, the Arab group. It's a group that says, we are people living in the land. Some of us are Jewish, some of us are Christians, some of us are Muslim. But we all speak Arabic, we eat hummus, we dance tabke, we have tabbouleh. We have been living here for centuries. We are the people of the land. Palestine Arabiya. And all these foreigners coming from all over the world, who are they? We respect Judaism as a religion. We understand people who are in conflict and who need a refuge, but these people are coming as conquerors to take over our land, and we are opposed to it because Palestine Arabiya, these people don't belong here, let them go back to wherever they came from. We are Palestinian Arab nationalists. We want freedom and independence. Palestine Arabiya. There's another group that says, which is the Zionist group. I know there are different kinds of Zionism, but the dominant kind that we see today says we need the land to be as Jewish as France is French. In view of all our suffering throughout the ages and the anti-Semitism and hatred that we face, the only solution there is to take a piece of land, preferably, in Palestine, because we have historic memory and religious significance, even though they're not a religious movement. We want to make that land Jewish as France is French. Eretz Israel. Whether they say God gave it to us, it's funny. Ben Gurion said, I don't believe in God, but he gave us this land. And the Zionist movement make it very clear. It's not the same as Judaism or the Jewish people. Because in the Old Testament, God gave the land to the Jewish tribes, and he told them, you have to give equal share to all those who are living among you who are not Jewish. And you only hold that land as long as you are obedient to me, otherwise the land will spit you out. This land doesn't belong to you, the land belongs to me, he said. But it's not a religious issue. It's a political issue. And it's an issue that has nothing to do with us. It has to do with Christian anti-Jewishness. Because the Holocaust took place in Germany, right? And the Inquisition, where did that take place? Spain. And the pogroms took place in Russia, Poland. Not in Cairo, not in Baghdad, not in the Muslim world or the Arab world. But these people think that we have to take this land and make it Jewish. They used to say, land without a people, it's empty. For a people without a land. Now that they are there and they see that there's people there, well, these people have to be pushed out. And more importantly, kept out once they are pushed out. Because how can you have a Jewish state unless you manage to create a Jewish majority, a dominant Jewish majority, and Jewish control of the land? Not by Jewish individuals, but by collective Jewish bodies that hold it on behalf of all Jews everywhere. Very important distinction, because that's the Zionist ideal. Not a land where it's free for Jews to buy land, but where Jewish institutional power can take land and make it inalienable, just belonging to Jews. Now, these two movements have clashed. They are mutually exclusive. They are caught in a zero-sum situation. Every additional Jewish immigrant who comes in is a loss and a danger to Palestinian Arabs. Every Palestinian baby that is born is a loss and a danger to the Zionist movement. Every dunum that is taken away from Palestinians, put in the public domain and therefore becomes Jewish, exclusively Jewish, is a loss to Palestinians, and this is the name of the game. Has been before 48, was the case in 67, is the case today. I don't know if you remember, but on the second month after the Gaza event started, Secretary Blinken from this country went and tried to convince Jordan to take in 1 million Palestinians from the West Bank, and to convince Sisi of Egypt to take 1 million people from Gaza. They refused because they couldn't, for internal reasons, accept that. But he was operating on the same Zionist logic. We need to push people out and keep them out to make this place Jewish. Now, I want to tell you again, without passing judgment, without pretending that there is any symmetry between the two, that it is impossible for either side to totally and completely destroy the other. That they must find a formula to live together. Many people thought that the two-state solution was such a formula. Let's take the 67 line. It may not be the best, it may not be the fairest, but I mean, after all, the Israelis won. Let them keep 78% of Palestine and create a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, with a nice corridor in the middle. Pragmatic solution that maybe people can live with. I admit, I was one of those who accepted for many years the two-state solution. We thought it's something we can live with. And the Arab world and the Muslim world accepted it in the Arab Peace Initiative. It used to be called the Saudi Initiative. 56 Arab and Muslim countries said, fine, go back to the 67 line. Create a Palestinian state. Find a way to share Jerusalem. And in return, you have full peace and full normalization. But the Zionist movement doesn't accept this. So they started putting up settlements all over the occupied territories. Today, there's 700,000 to 800,000 Jews living in that 22% of the land that's supposed to be a Palestinian state. So that doesn't work. When I reached the conclusion that the two-state solution no longer works, I wrote a little book you may see there called Beyond the Two-State Solution. You can download it for free. There's a QR code there. It's only $14 if you want the actual paperback. And I said the only solution is somehow Jews and Arabs have to find a way to live together in the same land, which means you need to tweak and adjust your ideology. I need to tweak and adjust my Palestinian Arab nationalism to accept that in Palestine today there are 7 million human beings who are not Arab and who are going nowhere. So my Arab Palestinian state needs to accommodate 7 million Jews who have come from all over the world and who are going nowhere. And Israeli Jewish Zionists need to adjust their ideology. Their state, with every possible advantage on its side, today controls all the land, but it has 7 million non-Jews, maybe slightly more, living within its borders that it cannot expel or terminate, and who are going nowhere either. So your state can be Jewish, but also Arab at the same time. I spoke to a Jewish rabbi before I wrote that book. I said, why do you want a Jewish state? What does a Jewish state do for you? How can a state be Jewish? And he said, after what happened to us, I want a Jew where a state where any Jew, anytime, anywhere, no questions asked, can go and live and be able to defend himself. I got inspired. I said, I got something better for you. How about a state where any Jew, anywhere, no questions asked, can go and live where he doesn't need to defend himself because nobody's out to get him. I said, how can that be? I said, you need to give up one thing and one thing only, and that is exclusivity. Your state can be Jewish, but not exclusively Jewish. And I, as a Palestinian, can get everything that a Palestinian state can give me, except for exclusivity. My state will have to be both Arab and Jewish. I have to accept the other as part of the fabric of my society. Is that possible? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And in that little book, I describe how you can do that, and what objections there are to it, and how you can address each and every one of the objections. The biggest objection, of course, is demography. People think that whoever has 51% somehow can dominate, delegitimize, crush and oppress and forget about the rights of everybody else. Whether you get those 51% through elections, or whether it's 51% of the electoral college, or whether it's somehow, if you have 51%, by democracy you can't ignore everybody else. You need to have a constitution and institutions that preserve the rights of the minorities and the rights of the individual against the oppressiveness of the majority. Well, what about security? Jews are obsessed with security. So how can we trust anybody with our security? I said, okay, we can have an arrangement under which the defense minister, the head of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and nuclear toys that we have, will always be a Jewish person with an Arab deputy. But the head of the police and the internal security will always be a Palestinian Arabs with a Jewish deputy, because we also have our history of oppression by the Mukhabarat and the Shin Bet and the Secret Service. So yeah, we have our fears too. We need protection. I said, more importantly than that, the new state should devote 10% of its defense budget to removing the causes of enmity between the two parties, to creating better understanding, to healing traumas, to compensate some of the most egregious injustices that happen. Because the biggest danger and threat to the security of Israeli Jews today does not come from Iran, and is not benefited by another squadron of F-35s and qualitative military superiority. Because they had qualitative military superiority over the Gazans, who didn't have anything. Didn't have any air force, didn't have any tanks, who didn't have any arms industry, who didn't have anything. And they were able to shock the Israeli army on October 7th. Yes, I think we can accommodate the Israeli desire for a right of return, but we have to accept the Palestinian right of return. Yes, we can accept the injustice of Israeli Jews living in Arab houses and Arab properties and on Arab lands, both in Israel itself and in the settlements of the occupied territories. You don't have to kick them out of their houses, you just have to provide housing and land and compensation for Palestinians who lost their property out of public lands which should serve the public, not just serve Jews. So anyway, I don't claim that this is the be-all and end-all, but this is an attempt to say that it is possible for people to live together in peace. In fact, it is more common for people to live together in peace than in war. Even in Palestine and the Middle East, for 13 centuries, Jews and Muslims and Christians lived together. Since the time of the Crusades and until Zionism propped up. So it is possible. We are not eternal enemies. Now, if you don't want to accept this, if you want to stick to your ideology, whether you're a Palestinian who wants Palestine Arabiya and kick out everybody, or if you're an Israeli Zionist who says, this is my only place, I need to be the only person here and everybody else can be elsewhere. Okay, I can't argue with you. You will continue to fight and kill, and you'll never have peace. Because there'll always be an injustice and a resistance to your demands. Okay, where do we go from here? How do we change the equation? How do we move the needle? The truth is that there is an opportunity now which has never occurred before. But to take up that opportunity, you must be willing to start acting. For many years, groups like ourselves have worked on education, information, getting people to know the facts, hoping that somehow by informing people we can change the situation. I can tell you that in recent years, especially the last 2 or 3 years, the Zionist movement has shifted gears. It no longer cares about public opinion, about the intellectuals, even about the press, even about the masses of people. Now it has concentrated its efforts on the top 1%, those who have power. In Europe, that's very clear. They've lost the battle. It's done. But they continue to have power over the top of the pyramid. In this country, they're beginning to lose the battle all over the place. With young people, certainly, even among the Jewish community, and even among evangelicals, they have lost and they are losing the battle. So they will go at the top. As long as we have control over the top. You lose the students, you lose the faculty, you lose, but you still have the board of trustees or the president of the university and the donors. You lose the masses in sports, and you lose the teams, and you lose the coaches, but you still have the head of FIFA who will come and support you. You lose the audiences, and you lose the groups, and you lose the musicians, but you can still control the few people at the top of Eurovision and be able to get what you want. You lose the church, the pews, the ministers, the preachers, but you still have the bishops. And you can, through them, control and prevent change from happening. What they don't understand is that the top 1% doesn't care about Jews or Judaism or Zionism or the state of Israel. They care about their own interests, and when their interest changes just a little, they will turn on Israel so fast your head will be spinning. And then you will see some real ugly anti-Semitism. And I hope all of you here will be there to protect your Jewish brothers and sisters when that happens, and it will happen in this country as well as elsewhere. You must base your position on principles and values, not on interests which can shift and change. Okay, my time is almost over to speak. I want to engage with you in some dialogue, hear some of your questions, and then I will have some specific ideas for you as to what can be done and what should be done. But in case we get carried away, I will mention right now that there is a sign up. There are these books, the Beyond the Two-State Solution. Don't have many of them here, but you can download it for free or order it. And there's The Truth Shall Set You Free, which is like a memoir describing my own spiritual journey, how I came to this position. More importantly, there is a sign-up sheet. I noticed some of you signed up but didn't put your email address. Does not help. Please put your email address so that we can stay in touch. FOSNA, Friends of Sabil, issues a newsletter, and also I write a blog there once a week, and sometimes it's worth reading. So if you're not on our mailing list, please put your name there. And I'd really like to see a FOSNA chapter in this city being active and vital and doing things, because there is a lot that can and should be done. And the atmosphere is ready, people are ready, ordinary people want to do something, and I mean by ordinary people, people who care about Palestinians but also care about Israeli Jews. Most importantly, who care about justice, to see that done. It is possible, we can do a lot, we are not helpless, we are not hopeless. So, I will stop here and give a chance for questions and answers.
So people can either stand up and ask your question, and we'll bring the mic, or you can write them down on cards. Does anybody want a card? Oh, okay.
All right, and while we are passing the cards around, we would love to count on your generosity. So we will have a basket that we will be passing around while we are starting the questions and answers here. So thank you so much for giving. Anybody who has a question and would like to start with John?
Can you hear me? Can you tell us what we should make of Trump's recent involvement in Palestine, Israel, and looks like a land grab to me, but maybe it's something else, and now also running around with the Saudi princess?
Well, the Trump plan is full of holes and full of poison pills that can destroy it as a plan. I wrote an analysis of it for the Arab Center of Washington, where I showed what the gaps are. But I'm going to surprise you and tell you that there's at least 2 or 3 positive things about the Trump plan. Yes. The first is that for the first time, there's going to be an international presence in Gaza. Maybe weak, the Israelis may try to control it, which countries will participate. They like Azerbaijan, they don't like Turkey or Qatar. They are going to try and use it as an instrument for their policy, but there will be an international presence which is absolutely necessary, because right now they have a totally free hand. Number one. Number two, it will put an end, or at least a major reduction, to the daily onslaught that was going on for 2 years, non-stop, with no restrictions, no rules of engagement, just utter killing and killing and killing. Daily, about 100 Palestinians were being killed. The very vast majority of them civilians who have nothing to do with fighting. Third, this will make operative the Hamas promise to suspend military operations. Now, listen to me carefully. Hamas is not all the Palestinian people. But Hamas was the one which used armed resistance with some effect against Israel. I believe Palestinians have the right to armed resistance, but would be foolish to exercise that right against such a massively military power. So if they're willing to suspend or stop fighting, it's a good thing. For us, not just for the Israelis, for us as Palestinians. Does not solve the problem? No, it doesn't. But at least it's a step in the right direction. They can't keep saying, oh, security, we're worried, we're afraid, they're shooting rockets at us, they're killing us. No, here they are, they stopped. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Fifth, it will allow some contact again between Gaza and the West Bank. This is something people don't talk about. But a strategic part of the Israeli operation against Palestinians is to totally fragment us and separate us from each other. Gaza has nothing to do with the West Bank. The West Bank has nothing to do with East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem has nothing to do with Palestinians who are Arab citizens. And all of them have nothing to do with 2/3 of the Palestinian people who are in exile and outside. Well, this time there may be a Palestinian participation in what's happening in Gaza from the West Bank and the Palestinian Authority with all its craziness. Fifth, there is going to be a US presence on the ground. Usually, the US participation has always been a negative, a horrible presence. But you know, when you put US boots and US observers and US people on the ground who have a job to monitor the ceasefire, to supervise the humanitarian aid going in, to ensure compliance by both parties, even though they are totally pro-Israeli, they create some kind of restraint. Because the pattern has been, the US would ask Israel, what do you want? So, okay, we want 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So the US comes up with a plan, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is our plan, the US plan. And then Israel says, we don't like it. We want to change it. This has happened again and again and again, including the Trump plan, which basically was written by Israel, which has everything Israel wants in it. Once you set it down as an American plan, the Israelis are saying, no. This restricts us. We don't want this. So, for US participation and involvement for all its problems, it's a positive. Now, does it solve the problem? No. The problem requires self-determination by the Palestinians, requires some elections, requires democracy, requires justice. This plan doesn't provide any of these things. So, our job continues to be there. Also requires some accountability for all the war crimes that were committed during this genocide. And the Trump plan does not give Israelis any exemption, even though Trump asked the Israelis to pardon Netanyahu and not to judge him too harshly.
Well, there's a question that asks, what will move the powerful top 1%?
Two things. Number one, their interests. And number two, people like you. BDS. Boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. Those who are at the top don't care about justice. They really don't care about Jews or about Palestinians at all. They have to be pushed by people from the bottom. Wait a minute, this is wrong. This does not happen. By the way, we are participants in what's happening, and we want to withhold our participation. We want to divest our money from those corporations and those bonds and those who are involved in this genocide. We want to boycott those politicians and those corporations and those institutions that are involved in this genocide. We want to demand justice and sanctions against those involved. You know that there are some countries, Australia and New Zealand. No Israeli can go to Australia and New Zealand without having, even as a tourist, without having to fill out a 13-page form. Did you serve in the Israeli army? What did you serve? Where did you serve? What was your role? What did you do? We want to know. Are you a war criminal or an ordinary person? You see, international law is not limited to the Security Council. It's actually not limited to the International Criminal Court, which the US is now trying to punish the judges and the prosecutors. Every country in the world has what's called universal jurisdiction over war crimes and crimes against humanity. You know, one reason why people don't want to call this genocide is a very solid reason, legal reason. Because there was a convention called the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. It describes what genocide is. There's no question this is a genocide, by the way. And then it requires every country to do something about it. Not to wait till it happens, but to prevent it even before it happens, and to punish those who call for it and who participate in it. Every single country has a duty to do something about it once they acknowledge that this is a genocide. That's why they don't want to acknowledge that it is a genocide. I have to tell you this because I'm a lawyer. Lawyers, when they deal with criminal law, every crime, whether it's murder or whether it's burglary or whether it's sexual harassment, whatever, has a number of elements in it. You have to check the boxes. Do all the elements exist? One of the hardest elements to prove is intent. You have to prove that somebody had intent. And the Genocide Convention makes it clear that there has to be an intent, otherwise it's not a crime no matter what you do. Usually you try to derive intent from the behavior itself, that you intended to do something because you behaved in a certain way. In the case of Israel, intent is the easiest element to prove, because they have said it again and again openly. Not just a few politicians here or there or a few demagogues, everybody from the president to the prime minister, to the defense minister, to the head of the army, to the chief rabbi, to the main pundits, to members of the government, members of the Knesset, to the entertainers, to the TV and radio. They've all used language that shows an intent of genocide. There are no innocents there. Even babies are legitimate target. We have to destroy them all. They are Amalek. Amalek. You're familiar with that term, Amalek?
Yes.
From the Bible. It's a very interesting term. Can I preach a little? Amalek is a tribe in the Old Testament that stopped in the way of the Hebrew tribe when they were coming in, and according to the Old Testament, the Lord ordered King Saul to kill them all. Men, women, children, and beasts. Totally, annihilate them. It was really a commandment of genocide. And when Saul failed to fulfill that commandment, he killed everybody, but he spared a few of the elites and the big noble families and some of the best cattle to. And the prophet came and says, what have you done? You have not obeyed my commandment, and you have lost my favor. To be sure, every single rabbi, or the vast majority of rabbis from that day to this day, have said that that commandment is no longer operative. You're not required, because it's really awful, and we don't know who Amalek is, and you're not required. There's 723 mitzvot, commandments in the Old Testament, and that particular one you're not required to fulfill. Until today. Today you hear not just rabbis, but politicians like Netanyahu, who is not even religious. He doesn't wear a kippah, he doesn't follow the law. The Bible shows us how to deal with them. They are Amalek. They have to be destroyed. So the intent of committing genocide is openly declared by the Israelis. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why the International Commission, the ICJ ruled that there's a plausible genocide. They got a list that was prepared by Palestine Legal of 500 statements that were made, some in Hebrew, mostly in Hebrew, but also in English, when it was made, who made it, what was their position in society. They continue to make these statements even today, by the way.
All right, another question. Who could replace Mahmoud Abbas, and is there hope for Marwan Barghouti to be released?
I don't know who will replace him. Somebody will, because among Palestinians, the mortality rate is 100%. Sooner or later, he's going to die. But it's almost irrelevant, because he has no credibility and no power. Many people hoped that Marwan Barghouti will be allowed out. In fact, when he was first arrested, many people thought he was being prepared to take a role in the Palestinian Authority. Right now, strangely enough, Hamas asked specifically that he be released, and Netanyahu specifically refused, perhaps at the instigation of the PA, but more likely because the right wing in Israel doesn't want him out. Whoever is the new Palestinian leader is going to be under close scrutiny, and if he deviates too much, assassination by the Israelis. So I don't know what to tell you. We Palestinians actually are left with very little leadership. The good thing is that Palestinian resilience does not depend on our leadership. It depends on ordinary people, depends on young people who have no feeling for Oslo or any of that stuff, but who want to see real and genuine liberation. And it's funny, because Palestinians generally are actually quite moderate, including Hamas people. when you come down to it, they are very reasonable. Safi, شو اسمه عفيف Safi used to say, we are unreasonably reasonable. But if you don't give us anything, yes, we will talk as big as anybody else. And we will sound as militant as you wish. But it is possible for Palestinians to accept a reasonable offer or a reasonable possibility of reconciliation and peace. Careful. Come closer here.
Thank you so much for your words, Jonathan, and for laying out so clearly to us the situation and the hopes that we all share for genuine justice. And my question for you is, as we look at the genocide that is on our screens on a daily basis, what gives you hope?
Good question. Very good question. What gives me hope? Well, first I want to make a distinction between hope and optimism. I'm not very optimistic. It really looks bad. But I am full of hope. And my hope is built on two things. One of them, religious. And it's a hope that I share not only as a Christian, but also most Palestinian Muslims have the same hope. We believe in a just God. And we believe He is in charge. And we believe this oppression cannot continue indefinitely. And that sooner or later, justice will prevail. That is a hope. It's an item of faith. That's the only way I can describe it. But I have another reason for my hope. And that is I'm a student of history. I used to be a history major before I went into law. And history tells us this kind of thing cannot prevail forever. It carries within itself the seeds of its own destruction. The state of Israel and the Zionist movement could have been a very progressive movement if it was created 4 centuries ago or 5 centuries ago. In today's world, you cannot set up a system that's built on blatant, open, legal separation and racism. Apartheid is today a crime. Colonization is no longer a nice word, even though Trump is trying to recreate some kind of colonial control over Gaza. Equality is now mandatory for most people. And if you think I'm off the track, remember, women in this country, even in this country, didn't have the vote 100 years ago. 50 years ago, even in this country, many people thought that it was a waste to send girls to school. After all, they're going to be married. Today, there's only one country in the world, Afghanistan, under the Taliban, who thinks you shouldn't teach girls. Every other country takes it for granted. Of course we have to teach girls the same as boys. So the world has changed. Zionism has no place in the 21st century at all. It's an anachronism. It cannot happen. So my understanding of history tells me you cannot have a state like the state of Israel in its current form, elbows out, right in the heart of the Arab and Middle and Muslim world, and somehow defying the rest of the world. Trump told them, even Trump told the Israelis, look, you can't act against the rest of the world. Even Trump recognizes that what they're doing, particularly in Gaza, is so out of step with where the world is. That gives me hope. Also, if I can say, my knowledge of my Jewish brothers and sisters who are repudiating Zionism, and those who are in crisis, paralyzed by the contradiction between what they believe and what they see is happening. And so they are silent, but they are really in crisis. That gives me hope. I am not standing against Jews or Judaism. I'm standing against the Zionist movement with my Jewish brothers and sisters who can see the problem.
We can still get some more questions, yes, madam?
Yeah, I didn't realize it's tethered to the framework. Jonathan, thank you for your visit here in Portland. We really appreciate it. Would you be able to say some more about how FOSNA would engage with different congregations,
Yes.
churches, especially here in
Yes. FOSNA, Friends of Sabil, has been a very important Christian voice for Palestine. I became executive director about 3 or 4 years ago. And with a very new board that's very vital and a very active staff, we are trying to do things a little differently. For example, we want to reach out to other communities other than mainline Protestant churches. So we have Orthodox churches that we are approaching, bringing in Catholics, reaching out to evangelical churches, trying to reach Hispanic churches, which in the past we have not been very good at. And if you have a chapter here that wants to be very active, I suggest that you start with these communities that ordinarily we have not been reaching out to. Bring them in. The Muslim community, which desperately needs to be engaged in this issue and who are more afraid and more vulnerable to the kind of racism that prevails in this country and to the kind of Christian nationalism that exists. We need to bring young people in, and young people are ready. They're not burdened with the same paradigms that have paralyzed the church. I've been involved, for example, with Mennonites, and we have something called Mennonite PIN, Palestine-Israel Committee Network. However, when this thing started in Gaza, all of a sudden, without our knowledge, a new organization popped up, mostly young people, called Mennonite Action. And they started getting people together and they started demonstrating. I was at one demonstration where they literally sat in and protested outside 40 different representatives calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and ending the bombing. And it was strange because they invited them to bring your hymn book along. Mennonites like to sing. So they come to these demonstrations with their hymn books. And they sit in these representatives' offices. Where did these people come from? 2 weeks ago, a month ago, they organized a demonstration in Washington where they deliberately planned to get arrested outside a senator's office. They took a petition there demanding that he changes his position. 62 of them were arrested, including my wife. Amazing the level of organization and energy that all of a sudden cropped up. So instead of just a small Menopin, the Mennonites Palestine-Israel Network, all of a sudden there's Mennonite Action with literally tens of thousands of young people out in the street doing something. So we need to shift from just information to activism. And FOSNA has registered a new 501c4 that allows us to be politically active in legislation and in elections and in supporting or opposing candidates. So we are shifting our emphasis as well, and I would urge all of you to also think in those terms. How can we reach out to new communities and together work against the injustice?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just want to point out that thank you so much for being here. And not a lot of people know this, but just a moment.
Use
In the
microphone.
Bible,
Use the microphone.
oh, okay, this is interesting. When I read the Bible, and there's a lot of nourishing wheat, but there's also a lot of bad. And it says that in total, God kills 300,071,186 people directly and orders another 1,862,265 people murdered. And I can tell you my source, but I just want to say that basing a person's principles on the Bible is not wise. There's a lot of stuff in there that leads to destructive behaviors, but that doesn't mean that it's all bad. I just wanted to point out that it's a very contradictory document. Steven Pinker, the Harvard psychologist, claims in Better Angels of Our Nature that it's been translated into 3,000 different languages, and we all know it's the most widely read document or text in the world. Billions and billions of copies are out there. So it's just, it's an interesting conflict, and I want to say that Langston Hughes says, hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. So I hope for peace. Thank you.
Thank you. I am not going to tell Christians in a church that the Bible is not an important source. I can tell you what's important to me, and I can tell you that religion generally, not just the Bible, can be a positive, but it can be a very toxic and destructive force. The problem with Christian Zionism is that it takes the Bible and very selectively takes a few verses out of context and uses them for political purposes. The problem is if somebody believes the Bible to be God's word, that's more important than anything else you can say, because God knows more than human beings. And if you think this is what God commands you, it trumps everything else. So, I want to say that every person can believe what they wish. If they are Christian and take the Bible seriously, I would like to sit with them and show them what the Bible actually says and what the Bible can be understood to mean. I think that also there is a concept of progressive revelation. And we find that also among Jews, not just Christians, where they have developed beyond some of the toxic genocidal commandments of the Old Testament towards a more social justice orientation. Jews today, at least rabbinical Judaism, they don't hold on to territoriality. That's no longer as important as it was before. And they don't hold on to the kind of Joshua mentality, although there are some people in Israel who are trying to revive it. And the strange thing is that those people usually are not religious, but they like to use religion to justify their political positions. So I don't know what motivates you or other people, but whatever it is, I think that seeking justice, seeking peace, seeking human dignity, seeking equality, seeking treating others as one treats oneself, the golden rule, there can be some very good ideas not in religion, but in humanity generally.
Hi, Paul Reed is a young person, relatively young compared to us, member of Mennonite Action, the Portland Mennonite Church, and he just returned from the Gaza Humanitarian Samud Flotilla, and he has spoken at our church. He's very engaging, and he is willing to talk to any congregation. If you have young people who might be interested in hearing a real life story from someone like Paul, he's more than available.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we found out during this Gaza episode is that there's a lot of interest out there. There's a lot of people out there. Many of them are silent, many of them are scared and afraid, and you have the opportunity to provide them with a framework to work jointly together, to work with other groups also, not just with Palestine-centered groups for justice.
I think we should give you a huge hand.